Sean Finnegan, and you are listening to Restitutio, a podcast that seeks to recover authentic Christianity and live it out today. Although powerful preaching, serving the poor, and missionary work often take the limelight in Christian ministry, the truth is that home groups, churches, and especially denominations will fall to pieces without competent and consistent administrators. The job isn't glitzy or glamorous, and it is often beset with equal parts of tedium, stress, and failure, but without it, nothing gets done, or at least not for long. Meet David Krogh, a faithful servant who has found himself in roles ranging from pastor to executive director in a denomination to academic dean of a Bible college. Over more than 5 decades of ministry, Krogh has been involved with countless decisions that have made the Church of God General Conference what it is today. Here now is episode 359, Faithfully Serving the Church of God with David Krogh. Well, David Krogh, thank you so much for talking with me today. I want to begin by asking the question, how did you first come to faith?
About 150 years ago, a Church of God pastor...
Oh, I thought you were going to say 150 years ago you were born.
Not me.
Sorry.
So a Church of God pastor was traveling through western Iowa and into Nebraska, where my grandparents had come over from Germany, taught the truths that we hold today, and they were baptized in 1868. They very much were faithful Christians. Obviously, I didn't know them. My family has interviewed people who did know them and said that they were very loving and kind people. They were generous people and really were people of the Bible. And so my grandmother was raised in that environment. She was the 8th of 8 children. And when she married, she passed those truths on to her husband and his parents and brothers and sisters. And my father was born and raised with teachings of the Bible and went to the Bible training class, which was the forerunner of Oregon Bible College, and graduated from there and
So was
pastored.
that like a pastoral training?
Yes. It was in 1921 when our General Conference was formed. One of their founding principles was that we need to have an educational facility so that we can raise up pastors who will help our churches. So I think that started in about 1923. My father, I think, went in 29. He and a number of other people went through the program and became pastors and lifelong friends. And my father married a girl who was attending our church in Oregon, Illinois, and she had been familiar with our truths and was baptized in the Church of God. And so I was raised in a home that put God first and the Word first. And I was taken to church when I was probably a few days old, and was raised in it my whole life. And that I'm very thankful for that kind of a family heritage. But there have been many other people along the way who have had an impact on my life spiritually. I can think back to Sunday school teachers.
Let me pause you right there. So you're saying that as far as your father was concerned, that he was a pastor when you were growing up the whole time?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Keep going.
Yeah, right after he graduated from the Bible training class, he took a pastorate in Ripley, Illinois, and continued to serve until he died in 1968.
Okay.
And,
so you grew up as a pastor's kid, and so then your spiritual formation occurred at Sunday school? Is that what you were saying?
Then as I got a little older, we had a youth program in our church, and I attended the summer youth camps that were sponsored by the General Conference, as well as my father was invited to speak at different conferences during the summer, and they usually had a Bible school that went along with that for kids. So sometimes I went to 3 or 4 Bible schools, 3 or 4 weeks of Bible school during the summer. So,
what was your attitude towards the Bible as a kid? Were you just like really interested in it, or just going with the flow, or didn't really
Yes,
care?
I was interested in it. My parents modeled reading the Bible every day, and in fact, we had a little devotions at breakfast every morning. And when I was old enough to read, I started reading at least a chapter a day, and there for a while I actually read the whole Bible through in a year's time while I was growing up. So the Bible was very important to me, and church work and spiritual things were always of great interest to me.
Okay, so did you have some sort of moment where you made a decision to, make Jesus your Lord, or was it just always pretty much there?
Well, I recognized that at some point I had to make a decision for myself. I couldn't just ride on the coattails of my parents and others in the church. And so I was thinking about baptism, and one Sunday my best friend and I were talking about that and decided that we were going to go forward at the end of the service. Well, my father didn't always give an invitation at the end of the service, but my friend told his dad, and his dad told my dad what we were talking about and thinking about, and so obviously my dad gave the invitation that morning, and my best friend and I went forward and were baptized later that day.
Very good. So as you grew up and you had to choose a career path, what did you decide on for that in your educational years?
Well, I guess I kind of had it in the back of my mind the whole time growing up that I'd like to be a pastor and be involved in ministry. And while I was going through high school, I was pretty good at math, and teachers really urged me to take as many math classes as possible, but that really wasn't my interest. I was more interested in history and geography and some of those types of courses. And the high school counselor took me aside and said, "No, you really need to get into math field and use the ability that you have." And I resisted that because I had plans at that point to go to Oregon Bible College, and I didn't think that math was going to serve me very well there or in the ministry. And so I held firm and graduated with the kind of courses that I thought would be helpful to me.
So you didn't end up pursuing math?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Other than I really enjoy accounting and working with numbers that way, but not as a career.
Don't you do the taxes for a lot of pastors?
Yes, that's kind of a service that we've offered to our
do you still do
constituents.
That, or was that...
Yes, yeah, I do about 20-some tax returns every spring.
Wow. So some people struggle just to get their own done, and you do 20.
Well, I've tried to keep current with the law, especially the ones that pertain to pastors, for my own purposes, and so I have a real burden to help our pastors pay as little tax as they are legally required to. Since most of our pastors are not paid very well, if they can save on taxes, that stretches their income. So
yeah. All right, so back to college. When you graduated from high school, did you go straight to college, or what did you do next?
Yes, I did. I went to Oregon Bible College in the fall after I graduated in the spring, and stayed there for 4 years. And during those years, I had an opportunity to be involved in various ministry activities sponsored by the college or local churches, and several of us attempted to start a church about 35 miles away in a small town where there were some Church of God families who wanted to have a church closer to them so they could invite their friends. They didn't think their friends would drive 35 miles to another church, and so gained some very valuable experience. And
so you started church planning even before you graduated?
Yeah, but when I was a junior in high school, a junior in college.
Yeah.
Actually, even before I went to the Bible college, I was a part of a planning group to start a church in Grand Rapids. My father was pastoring a church in Grand Rapids at the time. He and several others had an interest in getting another church started in a needy part of town, and so I met for several sessions with the planning committee just because I had a heart for church planting and reaching the lost. And eventually I pastored that church after I graduated from the college, and the Garden Park Church in Grand Rapids.
And it's still there today.
It's still there today. Mm-hmm.
Bill Dunn, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Bill Dunn pastors there. Good man.
Yep. Church has done well.
What was your college experience like back in those days? What years are we talking about here?
64 to 68.
Okay. And just walk us through, like, what was it like being a student there?
I had great respect for the instructors at the college and felt like they had a concern for me and imparted Bible knowledge as well as sharing their faith and modeling what it means to be a servant of God. During that time, I had a part-time job because my parents couldn't really afford to pay my college bills, and so I actually started working for the conference at that time in the print shop. They owned a print shop in Illinois and printed the Restitution Herald and Progress Journal and books and things like that. And so I learned to run a linotype, which most people don't know what one of those is anymore.
What is a linotype?
Well, it has a keyboard, and as you type the letters, it goes. There's a little thingamabob that goes into a row, and hot metal comes, and a little slug type thing is produced that has the type on it, and then you put those in a row on a flatbed, and the press runs ink across that and the paper. Out comes a publication.
I've heard about Gutenberg's movable type.
Well, that's actually how we did the headlines.
Wow.
The titles of articles. We hand set that type.
Wow.
But the linotype was quite an invention when it came along to speed up the process of making a whole row of type by just typing on the keyboard.
What was your impression of the Church of God at that period in the 60s when you were in school? Was it like a time of growth or a time of stagnation, or were people optimistic, or was there great concern, or what was the outlook at that time?
All of the churches that my father pastored were growing churches. He had a real heart for lost people and felt there was a need for outreach, and that the church really needed to be growing. And so I grew up seeing that as a model, and I guess that's where I really gained my concern about church growth and discipling and evangelism. And so in general, I think there was a very positive attitude. Our General Conference had what was called a decade of development from 1954 to 1964, where they actually set goals of starting new churches and trying to get each church to have goals of outreach and growth. That was an exciting time because I'm not sure that we met all the goals and reached all the goals, but a lot of progress was made just because that was held before our entire membership, that we needed to be active in growing the church, not just being complacent and being with the status quo.
Mm-hmm. And so after college, what was your first job?
Fortunately, I was given several opportunities for pastorates after college.
Mm-hmm.
The first approach that I received was from the Garden Park Church in Michigan, which is the one that I had some hand in trying to get started 4 years earlier. It so happened that the pastor who had served at that church had decided to resign, and actually he went to the Bible college to teach at the college, so that was an opening.
And who was that?
Francis Burnett was the pastor at that new church, and then went to Oregon. And so I, because of my previous interest in the church and being familiar with Grand Rapids, having lived there, I went ahead and accepted that invitation.
How long were you there?
I was there for 4 years.
Okay.
However, my father died a couple of weeks after I graduated, and I went to the church where he was serving and filled in for the summer to preach until they found someone. They really urged me to take over the church, the Brush Creek Church in Ohio, but I had really committed myself to Garden Park and didn't feel right about backing out on that, though it would have been very nice to have just stayed there, and my mother would not have had to move and uproot her life. But I really sensed that I'd made a commitment, and I looked forward to actually working with a newer church. Brush Creek had been around for probably 75 or 80 years at that time, and it wasn't quite the vibrancy and excitement in that church that there was in Garden Park. So,
yeah. So Brush Creek must have been founded in the 1800s.
Yeah, it goes back. Yeah.
Yeah. So you ended up at Garden Park, and you were there for 4 years. What happened next?
Even when I was in college, the executive director of the conference, Harold Doan, had published a piece in the Progress Journal saying, if anyone has an interest in working for the college or conference at some point, let us know, and we may be looking for somebody down the road, and we'd like to know of people's interest. So I wrote a letter to him and said that at some point in my life I could see myself working at the conference in college because I had a real interest in that work. Since I had started attending General Conference when I was 6 months old, my parents always went to General Conference, and I developed a real keen interest in the conference.
Maybe you could just describe what General Conference is, just for those who aren't familiar.
Well, it's an association of churches that believe like we do. There's about 100 churches in the conference, and they collaborate on working together to sponsor the Bible College, as well as publications and coordinate missions and those types of things through the General Conference.
And I remember I attended the General Conference last year, which you've been on my case to do for some time. And I remember that somebody mentioned that you have been going to these for a long time. What was the number of years that you've been going to the General Conference?
I'm 74, so I've been to 75 conferences because I went to one before I was one. So,
and we're not counting in utero attendance.
No, we could add another one there because I was born in December, so I actually attended the one in August before I was born. So
you've been to 75 of these meetings over the years,
mm-hmm.
and you wrote this letter and said, "Hey, I'd really like to participate. I really believe in what the Church of God is doing, and I'd like to help out."
Right.
How did he receive that letter?
He was glad to get it and said, "Yeah, I'll put it in the file." And he said one of the things we really like is for employees here to have had some pastoral experience so that they know what's going on in our churches and are sympathetic to the needs of pastors and members. And so after you graduate, we'd really like to see you take a pastorate and get some experience that way. I had an uncle who was in the business management field. He trained people in management, and spent a lot of time talking to him and appreciated his life work, and that also gave me an interest in managerial type things and business aspects of our work. And so actually 2 years after I went to Garden Park, I was invited to come on staff, and I really was not comfortable with that. I felt that I needed a little more experience. Also, I was in the middle of a program at a business college, which I thought would help me with my conference work, and so I declined that offer. And then 2 years later, they made another offer and were a little more insistent that time that they really needed me to come, and I did respond at that point.
And what was the role they were requesting you for?
Well, I was in charge of the business office as the first position that I had at the conference. And during the time I was there at the conference in the early several years, I served as an interim pastor at several area churches that didn't have a pastor. The pastor of the Blessed Hope Church in Rockford had died, and they were looking for someone and didn't want to make a quick decision, and so I served for a year as an interim pastor, driving 25 miles to the neighboring city, and again, gained valuable experience and really enjoyed my work with that church. And then the East Oregon Church in the other side of the river in Oregon lost their pastor, and so I took another 9-month interim pastorate there. So I've always been interested in local church work, and then when I wasn't pastoring those churches, my wife and I were very active in the Oregon Church, and we promoted evangelism and outreach and took part in training people to share their testimony and their faith. And my wife started a junior church, and the church grew substantially during those years, and we really enjoyed our ministry there.
So what happened next for you after you
Well,
came on staff?
yes, after I served for several years in the business office, the editor of the Restitution Herald retired, and I was invited to serve as the editor, an interim editor, because I was informed that the board of directors was interested in me taking over the leadership of the General Conference as the executive director. Stan Ross, who was in that position, was in his upper 60s, and they weren't sure how long he would want to continue, and so my editorship was an interim situation for a year. And then, unfortunately, the president of the Bible College, John Lewis, was killed in an automobile accident, and he and his wife and the the student services dean were all killed, and so I was asked to be an interim president of the Bible College for a year while they did a search to find a permanent replacement.
What year was that?
That would have been 79. Actually, before he died, I had been asked to become executive director, and Stan Ross was going to retire, but because of the death of John Lewis, Stan Ross agreed to stay on for another year, and I was asked to fill in at the college for a year. And
so we have two positions we're talking about here. Executive director is
the
coordinating the denomination, and then the president is
yes.
coordinating the college.
Yes, right.
And you have been slated to come in on the conference side, but instead, because of the tragedy, you came in on the college side.
Right.
Okay. So what happened next?
So then at the end of that interim year at the college, I did take over the work of the conference as executive director, and served for 5 years, and then at that point there was a decision made to kind of combine the position of president of the conference and the president of the Bible College into one position, and I was asked to assume that position. In 1985 is when I took over as the combined positions. The president of the Bible College had also resigned at that time, and so...
So did you say 5 years you were executive director?
Yes,
and then
from 80 to 85.
80 to 85, and then you took over both?
Yes, in 85.
And how long did you do that?
Until 2001, so...
That's a long time.
16 years.
16 years being in charge of not only the conference, but also the Bible College.
Right.
Now, that's an interesting period. So it's really that was really your call, I'm guessing, to move down here to Georgia. Was that your idea, or what was your role in that whole 1990s
actually,
move?
Dating back to the 60s and 70s, there had been talk of moving into a larger metropolitan area where our students would have more opportunities to be involved in ministry.
Because Oregon, Illinois is
a town of 3,000 people.
Very rural?
And very rural and all white. And recognizing the needs of our world and even our country, more momentum seemed to be generating to relocate. So it had been talked about for almost 20 years. The board of directors appointed a committee made up of several of us staff members to begin to do research and explore a number of cities as possible locations. And so our team used resources to gather information on growth of cities and what their racial makeup was. And one of our goals also was to locate the college next to a community college or a state university where our students could get their general education courses there, and they would just focus on the Bible and ministry at the Bible College. Trying to have a staff adequately prepared and have education to teach a wide range of general education courses just was not feasible.
Right, and really unnecessary if you did have another college campus nearby.
Yeah.
You were then pushing for this.
Yes, absolutely.
You were part of the,
absolutely.
And I'm sure there were some people that were pushing against it, saying, you guys are crazy, don't do this,
absolutely.
It's too risky, it's never going to work.
Right, yes.
This decision period, I'm sure, took some time for everyone to agree?
Yeah, about 85 or 86, just right after I had taken over the two positions, is when things really began to gel. And of course, we didn't make the move till 91. So during that whole time, we gathered information, began to make the case to our membership that this was something that would really enhance our work, would be a real blessing. You're right. There was strong opposition.
Oh, there always is.
From
and
especially for a major thing like this. We had been located in the Midwest and in Oregon, Illinois,
and you're looking
since
to move to the
1921.
Southeast. I mean, it's a totally different part of the
of course,
country.
that decision hadn't been made at that point to move to the Southeast. I mean, in the process, we were looking at, we finally narrowed it down to 5 metropolitan areas.
Well, do you remember the 5?
One was Kansas City, Kansas or Missouri. One was near Chicago. One was in Columbus, Ohio, Indianapolis, Indiana, and Atlanta.
Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
Why did they pick Atlanta, Georgia?
Well, we did intense research. Our team actually traveled to all 5 of those places. We looked for the college that we could locate next to, and in finding that college, our real desire was to be close enough that our students could walk from our campus to theirs, so that transportation and time spent going back and forth would be minimal. So we went to colleges. We looked to see if there was land adjacent. We had real estate people working with us. We obviously were concerned about the cost of living for our staff, and just the whole environment of where we thought would be best to train our students. And so after we had done all the research on those 5 cities, we presented that to the board of directors. We basically recommended Atlanta, but it was their call. They unanimously supported that choice. And then, of course, the real work began of pulling that off. And we found land here adjacent to Clayton State University, a 12.5-acre plot, and we negotiated and were able to buy that piece of property. And then, of course, we had the process of designing the buildings to be on that property, as well as trying to sell the properties that we had in Oregon, Illinois. In addition to 4 buildings, main college buildings there, we also owned 5 houses that we had began to acquire in the area surrounding the campus for future expansion. And in fact, students and staff lived in those houses once we bought them, and the rents that we collected were paying for those houses. So
now, were you concerned about teachers being willing and staffers being willing to move all the way across the country?
Well, obviously we included them in all of the planning, even though there were just 5 of us on the relocation team. We kept them informed. We discussed options, and of course, the board and I tried to determine what our needs would be in the new location. We just didn't feel like we could move every employee, and of course, a lot of them didn't want to move just because they had spouses who had good jobs in the area. So secretaries and support staff generally were not interested in moving. But we did talk with all of the key instructors, and they all were very supportive of the move. And even though it meant a lot of disruption for them and them having to sell homes and their spouses giving up jobs, they were willing to make that sacrifice because they all recognized that the future was unfortunately not in a little town of 3,000 people. And the attendance had continued to decline at the college, and it was just hard to get students to come there. It was hard for them to find meaningful employment, and then, of course, we still had the general education issue of how to deliver those courses.
Wow, it seems like quite a step of faith this whole period was to move all the way down. So looking back on it 30 years later, do you think it was the right decision? Do you have regrets about it, or what would you say about it today, looking back?
Well, that's a good question. And recently I was asked to make a presentation at the Heritage Conference on the steps of relocation and then looking at where we are today and whether it was a good move. And I 100% believe that it was a good decision. It was worth the stress and the pain of physically moving the whole operation here. and feel that we are much, much further ahead in our ministry and in our mission work and the Korean extension that we have. None of that we really could fully envision from Oregon, Illinois. We just knew that we needed to make changes that would open doors that we were definitely close to us there.
Do you happen to know the numbers for the Korean extension this semester?
It's a little over 50.
A little over 50 more.
At one point, it was closer to 100, but then we had some difficulties with immigration approving our recertification, and that kind of discouraged some students from coming. But it gradually is building back up.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's interesting. So you were the executive director for 21 years.
Right.
And then the president for 16.
Yes. Right.
And then in 2001, what happened? You got in trouble and you got fired? No,
well,
I'm just kidding.
Well,
you stepped down, or
there was a study made of where we were going. The board of directors did feel it was time for a change in leadership, and so said that they were going to go in a new direction. And I was invited to stay on for a year during the transition, and if the new president wanted to keep me on afterward, they were fine with that and encouraged me to do that, but there were no promises. And
okay. And who was the next guy? Was it Brian Atra?
Tim Jones became the head,
Wasn't Brian Atra?
Chief Administrative Officer, and then Brian was also hired then as president.
Oh, so they went back to two positions.
Yes.
Okay.
And another piece of the mix is that Rock River College in Beloit, Wisconsin was being formed at that time. And so Brian Atra was asked to serve as kind of the president of both of those entities and do a lot of the teaching.
Well, it's hard to be in charge of one institution in Wisconsin, you said? And then also in Georgia at the same time. How...
Well, it didn't work,
right.
frankly, and in fact, Brian didn't live in either of those places. He lived in Missouri.
So he's in a whole other place.
Constantly traveling, and the expense of that, and not being at either location for very long. Obviously, somebody had to make decisions and carry things on. You can't just wait 3 or 4 weeks until somebody shows up to deal with issues. So
Tim Jones was the executive director. Brian Atra was kind of the commuting in a sense.
Right.
And what was your role during this early 2000s period?
I was asked to assume the role of registrar of the college.
Okay, so that's when you started as registrar.
At that time, Kent Ross was also dismissed from the faculty. And so that opened, he was doing a lot of the registrars and academic work. And so I was asked to do that. But during the 2 or 3 years, I basically continued with many of the things that I had done before as president, just because I knew how to do them. And Tim Jones was trying to get up to speed with understanding what the organization was doing, and had his agenda of things he wanted to pursue. And so there was not a lot of change. I continued to
so you're still doing the same kind of work. It's just somebody else is getting the title.
Right, and making the final decisions.
And
I was able to make that transition and enjoyed not having the stress of having responsibility for everything.
But then eventually Brian Atra, I know I came in 2003, and I remember seeing him in that lobby area, and I remember he was on his way out. So I don't know if it was in 2003 that he stopped serving.
Probably it was.
All I remember was Tim Jones.
Yes, right.
And I think he was both.
Yes, so it got merged back. There was kind of an experiment for that 2 or 3 year period to see if it would work, and it didn't. And it hadn't really worked before. When there were two heads of two organizations that were working so closely together, there was nobody to make final decisions. And the General Conference had its desires and needs, the college had its, and so there developed between the two staffs a competition for money and resources, and
So in your estimation, it's better to have one person doing both?
Because of the small size of our organization, and with competent help, the head can accomplish both things while making sure there's unity and coordination, because obviously our students need to be supportive of the General Conference and know what it's about and how the conference works in terms of when they get out to be pastors. And so very, very big need for collaboration.
Interesting. So you were registrar then for, what, 20?
Well,
15,
Joe
20
Martin at that point was made academic dean, and then when he became president in 2010, then I became academic dean as
but
well.
You were still
as
the
registrar. Yes, right.
Okay.
So those two positions were combined.
But you started as a registrar in 2001,
mm-hmm.
And when did?
And then 2010 was when Joe became president. And,
but you stepped down last year as registrar officially?
This last fall, Michael Sisler was hired to be the academic dean and the registrar.
So you did 18 years as registrar.
Yes, right. Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to work out the numbers.
Right. And
this is recent history now.
Nine as academic dean.
So 18 as registrar and then 9 as academic dean,
right.
Carrying both of those responsibilities overlapping.
Right.
One of the things that I saw when I was here and since then was your passion for international students and all that you did to bring international students into the college. Can you talk about that, how you got that started, and why that was so important to you?
Well, once I was the one that took us through the steps of being recognized by immigration to have international students here.
And what year was that about?
That was 2001.
2001.
And so it was about the
So as
time,
soon as you transitioned to that registrar...
Actually, it was in the works before I was replaced as president.
I got you.
And Steve Ahn had been a student at the college and began to talk about, we really need to do something to train people who speak Korean. And here's a field where outreach can be done. We applied to immigration, got permission to have international students. And so the initial international students were Koreans, but word began to spread that we were eligible for international students, and there are so many people of other countries who live in the Atlanta area that they became aware of the college.
Because the airport.
Yeah, right. And there are big communities of other nationalities and religions in the Atlanta area. There's a big Hindu community on the east side of Atlanta, and the Korean community up in Johns Creek and that area. There's 100,000 people of Korean descent, and all the stores have Korean food in them and signs on the doors, and the word of mouth began to spread, and so we began to receive applications from international students, and some of them were able to get visas, some were not. But we were glad to serve them and have really enjoyed and benefited from them being here. Some have stayed on and become part of the Church of God. Others have learned what we teach, but did not necessarily join our movement.
Right. And this is something that took a significant amount of your time over the years, dealing with all the red tape and the bureaucracy and the complications of...
Right. Because we actually got in right before 9/11, and then once that happened, then all the regulations and everything began to come into play. Actually, before 9/11, everything was done pretty much with paper and pencil to fill out applications and all that stuff. And of course, once 9/11 happened, immigration really tightened up things and put things online, and the checkpoints where people had to jump through certain hoops. And so that has been a time-consuming process of making all that happen.
Yeah. And do you have any idea how many students came through during those years that you were... as a registrar, international students?
Oh, international students.
Any idea of how many different countries you worked with?
Probably 6 or 8 countries.
Like what countries are we talking about here?
Well, we had some from Bermuda and the Bahamas, and then primarily African countries, Kenya. Actually, we had some from South Africa, one from Moldova. Well, we had several students from there, and...
You had Ghana.
Yeah, right.
Was in there.
Yep, and Nigeria.
Nigeria, for
right.
sure.
Yeah, so
a few Nigerians.
Yep.
Cameroon.
Yes.
Elizabeth Egby,
right. Yes.
remember her?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a number of different countries,
Yeah.
Especially African countries,
Right.
which I think is great, to have that kind of diversity. I have some interesting memories of attending the Atlanta Bible College in those early 2000s, where I got a real interesting mix in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have other just like Midwestern white people from the Church of God or from the Carolinas or something, and then you'd have community students from the local, the town at that time was Morrow, that area outside of Atlanta, and they tended to be black folks and older and already had established their jobs and everything else in their lives, and now they're coming as night students. Right. And then you had all these random foreigners from other countries sitting in the classroom, right? Yeah. Whether and when I attended, also the Koreans were using the same campus as the English speaking. So it was a real whirlwind of cultural diversity, which I think is really, really helpful if you want to be a Christian leader today, that you have the world on your heart, not just your own, local village or whatever.
Yep.
This leads into the whole subject of missions as well, because I know that you have been very involved at LHI, Lord's Harvest International, which is the missionary wing of the Church of God. Right. When did your involvement with them start, and what was that like over the years?
I was appointed by the board of directors to be on the mission board, I think in about 2002, and served in that position for about 17 years. And during that time, our mission board was responsible, of course, for raising funds for mission projects, and we approved mission trips and helped get people signed up for those and to raise the funds to go. Our work did expand to other countries during that time. The work in Pakistan was opened up. I think Haiti was just beginning to be connected with us in the early 2000s. Our work in Peru had been kind of touch and go for a while, and we began to be more regular in sending people down there for training classes and preaching and evangelistic work, and that work has really grown over the years to include more churches in different parts of the country. We did have some contacts in Uruguay and Ecuador and some other countries. So our mission board usually met in person once a year, but we spent a lot of time on the phone and by email to oversee these fields and to encourage the native workers. And of course the work in Russia really opened up during that time also.
And Africa as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That was already in place at that time.
Yeah,
right?
It had started, yes.
It had already started at that time?
But has
in Malawi and Mozambique in particular.
Right. But the work in Kenya.
First just Malawi.
Yes, right.
And then Mozambique.
And then Kenya.
And then, Tanzania and Kenya.
Yeah.
And now what's that one next to
Uganda?
Uganda, yeah. So, Lord's Harvest International has really grown in the last 20 years, wouldn't you say?
Tremendously, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that must be gratifying to see that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you yourself were involved in the trip to Peru, right?
Yeah, I made 12 trips there over the years. Bill Wattell was fluent in Spanish and went on a lot of those and did most of the teaching and preaching. My Spanish is not very good, but he needed help with logistics, and that work has now been turned over to others. And I did take a team to Haiti, and we also did an exploration trip to Thailand at one point. It looked like there was an opportunity to work with some orphanages and some needy people there, but that didn't really materialize.
Very good. My wife told me that it was very, very important that I ask you about chocolate.
Uh-huh.
And I, of course, remember very fondly your chocolate parties. What is the story with that? Were you just always a chocolate guy, or is that something that you got into later? I remember you would have these chocolate parties, and you have all the students, and you'd have all these other random people, and your house would be full of people, and you'd say to you'd give us a to-go box and say, eat as much as you want, take as much as you want, and there was still so much more.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
Well, I've always liked chocolate, but 20-some years ago, my family took me to a restaurant, and they had a death by chocolate dessert, and I just thought I'd try that, and enjoyed that, and so somehow that name stuck, and I decided that I'd throw a little party with chocolate dishes and invite the students and staff over. And so I probably started off with 10 or 12 desserts, all made of chocolate, and put them around the house in different places, and people could sample them. Over the years, it grew to 40 or 50 desserts that I was making.
And how many days off of work where you were just...
It got to the place I had to almost take a week off because there just wasn't enough time at home at night when I got home to bake that many things. So I did that for 16 years.
Yeah.
And finally, the thought of doing it again...
It was just too much,
It was too much.
Yeah.
And... I've had people ask me to resume it, and
well, it was legendary. Let me tell you, it was legendary. And
well, I heard that it was on somebody's bucket list, and that's why I really did the 16th year. I was going to stop at 15, but some people said, "Oh, but this is on my bucket list, and if you don't do it, I won't be able to."
Yeah, I'll just have to die with an empty hole in my heart, having never attended a David Krogh Death by Chocolate party.
Did it one more time.
Yeah, I think chocolate is good for evangelism, wouldn't you say? You have a practice also of making fresh chocolate chip cookies for first-time visitors to your church, right?
Yep.
You still do that?
Yes.
So how many years have you done that? Probably since the 90s?
25.
25 years you've been doing that.
Started the church in 94, and the first Sunday, of course, we had about 100 visitors. So
yeah, that's a lot of visitors.
I had been baking a lot that week as well. My practice is normally, if we have visitors on Sunday morning, to go home from church and bake some cookies and deliver them yet that day. And that's impressed a lot of people, that someone would show up on their doorstep the same day that they visited the church, and feel like some people have stuck and come back because of that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, you got to use whatever you can to show love and hospitality to people, and man, that's making an impression. It really is.
Yep.
You know, it's personal, it's individual. Very good. Well, let me ask you this: if you could snap your fingers and change one thing in the Church of God today, what would it be?
Well, because of my interest in evangelism, I wish that more of our people were concerned about that, and were doing things specifically designed to reach out beyond the church and make an impact on people's lives. And that has been probably my greatest disappointment, that more has not happened. One of my real goals as the head of the organization was to plant a bunch of new churches, and we actually planted about 75 churches during the time that I was executive director and then president. We lost almost that many churches during that same period of time, but my thought is we would have been dead if we had not planted new churches. And so we know that the life cycle of churches is they're born and they grow, and then sometimes they die. And as painful as that is, that's a fact of life. So there's a need to constantly be starting new churches. There are new opportunities that arise, and there seems to be a much greater vibrancy in new churches than some of the old churches, and that's not to...
Especially for outreach.
Not to criticize the old churches, but there's just a momentum and excitement that is contagious, and younger churches seem to grow faster and better than older churches. And so
you're a strong advocate for church planting.
Absolutely. And so my wife and I were involved in two church plants here, when we first came down in 91, and then we were part of the Cornerstone team in 94, and we'd sort of hoped to keep doing that, but that hasn't particularly happened here. Other people have kind of picked up the ball, and other new churches have started.
What would you say would be your biggest regret?
I think I spent too much time in my office and maybe not as much time with students to mentor them and share my heart with them and vision, and so I think I would have either hired more support staff to take care of some of the nitty-gritty details and spent more time with people. I did a fair amount of travel to our churches, but that's also something that I think is really important for our staff here to be out with the people and to see what's going on in local churches and encourage those people and support them any way we can. So,
very good. So last year you retired, or what? How would you describe your transition?
Our staff has continued to kind of shrink over the past 10 years, and the board recognized the need for succession planning, and had talked to Seth about knowing that at some point I'm not going to be able to be here and continue with all the things I was doing, and to bring in a younger person who I could mentor for a while and teach things about the job. And so I was very supportive of Michael Sisler being employed. He and I see things very much alike. We're both kind of the same personality, and he's been a quick learner, and it's been a joy to work with him. But I'm still continuing more perhaps with general conference type ministries now than so much with the college, even though I do still teach a couple classes each semester at the college and involved with finances and scholarships and things like that. Seth has just assigned me some other duties with the general conference. I've been appointed to the Ministerial Recognition Board, which oversees the licensing of our pastors. It's always been required to have a staff member be a part of that, and so I'm serving in that role. Though I'm not on the LHI board, I'm still the liaison between our staff and the board to facilitate the transfer of funds and to make sure that the record keeping and all that is correct, as well as assisting with making sure mailings go out and things like that.
So you're still full time then?
Yes, I am.
Do you have a title now, or are you just general administrative?
Special projects.
Special projects.
Yes,
okay.
Which that can catch just about anything. And I've always had an interest in the Ministers' Retirement Association, and I'm a trustee of that. And we keep trying to do some innovative things to make our retirement program better. And so I have a lot of those interests. I've been involved in planning our summer 100th General Conference this summer, and I'm on the History Committee that plans the Heritage Conference, right. And so my connections here with the archives and everything has been valuable too.
But you don't have to keep track of all the students anymore.
Right.
Well, that must be a relief.
It is. It is. And Michael is taking over.
Chasing them down for payment and chasing the teachers down for grades and all that. Man, what a relief. You know?
Right.
Yeah, I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
And you're going to stay on for quite some time, right? Or do you have?
Well, I have no plans to retire. Seth Ross said that I could keep working here till I'm 95 if I wanted to. So I have a few more years. And
yeah, you got plenty of time.
So who knows? As long as my health is good and I have my mental capacities, I would like to keep working, and maybe I'll cut back a little bit at some point and not work a 45-hour week, but whatever.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So anything else you'd like to say, just by way of closing?
I feel that God has blessed me immensely with being raised in a Christian home and having the opportunity to serve in so many ways and knowing so many wonderful people. And I just feel like I'm extremely privileged to have lived the life that I have, and that He's given me the health to continue to do it and to see the fruits of some of my labors.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for this interview. If you'd like to find out more about David Krogh, you can visit atlantabiblecollege.com and check the staff page for contact information. You can check out the denominational webpage at coggc, that's coggc.org. And you can take a look at the missionary organization that Krogh is very involved with called the Lord's Harvest International at lhicog.com. If you'd like to make any comments or ask any questions about this interview, just come on to restitutio.org and find episode 359, Faithfully Serving the Church of God with David Krogh, and leave your comment there. Also, I wanted to plug the Salt and Light Study Night online fellowship. If you're looking for fellowship, you don't have somebody near you, and you'd like to join one that's online, a few people from the Restitutio community have started this fellowship just recently. They're in the book of James right now, and it's 8 o'clock on Tuesday nights, Eastern Standard Time, and that's 5 o'clock West Coast time. So if you are interested in joining Salt and Light Study Night, which is this online meeting, Zoom meeting, Tuesday nights, you can contact them at salt.light.studynight@gmail.com. And they'll send you the link so you can join in and get some fellowship. It's really important, according to Hebrews 10, that we don't forsake the gathering together. In our current time, that's more difficult than it has been in the past. But when it comes to an online fellowship, I mean, it's just as easy as it gets. It's really cool to see people from different places in the country that are able to join in and get supported, get prayed for, and study the Bible together. So I encourage you to check that out if you're interested. saltlightstudynight@gmail.com is the email. Just ask them for the Zoom link, and that's Tuesday nights. Also, I wanted to share with you some good news about the rating for Restitutio. I know I was kind of dogging you guys to leave customer reviews, but we have just now tipped the scales to 4.9. We were at 4.8 for a long time because a couple of people had left 1-star ratings and a 2-star rating. And so now there have been enough 5-star ratings to get to 4.9. And so I just want to thank all of you who, whether you wrote a review or not, gave that 5 stars. There's 87 ratings so far, and it's really helpful because, let's face it, there are people that are not going to like the kinds of positions that I hold and that people on this show hold as far as doctrine, as far as Christian living. And so it's inevitable that I'm going to have criticizers and people that come on to try to tank the rating. But I'm real thankful that so many of you have taken the time to do it. I know it's annoying, but I do appreciate it. So I just wanted to mention that and say thank you so much. If you'd like to support Restitutio, you can do that online at restitutio.org. I'll see you next week. And remember, the truth has nothing to fear.